Hi guys, I'm going to do my best to give you a quick summary of Chapter 5, Why Am I Reading This? From Do I Really Have to Teach Reading? By Chris Giovanni. Basically, it all boils down to setting a purpose for reading for your students, because so often they fail to take away from it what we want them to take away from a reading if we don't tell them why they're reading it or tell them exactly what we want them to know or what we're going to expect them to do with what they've read. And basically it says that there's two main reasons that we need to the purpose for reading affects the reading comprehension, and the first one is it affects what they remember. If I ask you just to pick out a fact from a reading, you're probably just going to remember that fact. If I ask you for a more broad kind of feeling or tone, something like that, that will require you to remember it a little bit more and analyze it differently. Also, it's going to affect the pace of the student reading. If students are reading for something that's a big, broad goal again, they might kind of read slowly. If they're just reading because they want to find out, what, it doesn't have to be a book. If they're just reading, the movie schedule, they're going to read quickly to just find out the time that they want for the movie that they want to see. They're not going to go through and read everything, for example. Now, one way that Chris Giovanni uses this setting a purpose with her students, even her AP senior classes, is she asks them to talk about something that they read and think about the purpose. And this, something that they read over the weekend. And so this just gets them thinking about how often they read and how really you do read for a purpose in everyday life. And that's the habit she wants them to be in the classroom, even if she's not always explicitly telling them, this is why I want you to read this. And also, one of the things that she mentions in this chapter is that one of the hardest things about her job is helping teachers identify a clear instructional purpose for assigned reading. Because we all know there's that certain part of our content that we just aren't really thrilled about having to teach, but we've got to teach it. Especially in upper levels in English, some of the books get complex and we wouldn't be interested in reading them at all if we didn't have to teach them. Our students usually feel the same way. And so one way that she tries to help teachers with this is through her instructional purposes chart, or looks like this. You can see an example of it on page 55, 56, and 57. There's some filled out ones there. And then the blank one, if you guys want to check it out for use on your own, is on page 128 in the index. Basically, it's just boiling everything down to the nuts and bolts. What are students what's essential for them to know? What's going to cause them difficulty? What's going to help them negotiate the difficult parts? What do they need to do with the information that they're reading? I think that's probably where you would get most of the purpose from. And also, how will they hold their thinking while they read? And now this question for me was really challenging. Especially in Spanish, because my students are true beginners and there's not a lot that they have to hold there. I mean, they can hold it for maybe 5 seconds, I thought initially, but the chapter goes on to really explain pretty well how they can do so and how that chart can help us find out how we can do so. And other than that, she spends a little bit of time discussing what readers do when they aren't given a purpose, but I think we kind of all know what that is, and that's just kind of zone out. She's got a little chart on page 61 that talks about determining possible purposes that could help you find a purpose, but she cautions strongly against using that as a checklist. She just kind of wants you to use that to help you if you're really struggling to find a purpose for reading. Also, something she mentions is that she teaches her students the difference between the reciting voice and the conversation voice that's inside their head when they read. For me, this is like when I read the words and I read what's on the page, but I can't even tell you what I read when I look up at you. This is the kind of reading I do at like 9:30, 10 o'clock when I'm really tired and I just, you know, it's not going to stick, right? But she encourages students to recognize that and to take responsibility for their reading and their reading comprehension, and to make themselves know that they're paying attention and having the conversation voice, as she calls it, the kind that is asking questions and making connections with the text. And she's got another little chart on 63 that helps them distinguish between the I'm zoning out and the I'm paying attention reading, but I think that's kind of personal, really. It's going to be different for everyone. And we probably all have our own way of explaining that and describing it. I do really appreciate that she took the time to do so, though. And other than that, that's really the bulk of it. There is a comprehension constructor chart that she has on page 64. It's figure 5.5. You might be interested in that if you're looking for something for really struggling readers who are just having trouble taking them the next step. Like, they can read something and kind of maybe form an opinion, but you want to take it a step further. That chart that she's got there could maybe help you create a chart of your own for your students like that in that situation. And it also, she goes back to, like she does at the end of the last chapter I read from her, she goes back to just deciding what's important, cut out extra content, and really try to focus on helping our students become better readers. Thanks.